Welcome to another episode of the Apex Perspective podcast. Today, I have with me Mohit Nagpal, who's currently a staff engineer at Uber, and he started off his career as a software engineer. He subsequently led as a software engineer at Microsoft, where he became a principal software engineer. And like I said just now, he had joined Uber as a staff software engineer subsequently. But Mohit, can I hear from your perspective more about your background? First, more about why you became technical and what led you to Uber.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Aryan, for having me. I appreciate having conversation with me.
Mhm.
On my side, I joined Microsoft in the beginning of my career, and I spent like over a decade in Microsoft. I worked in India for 5 years and 5 years in US Redmond campus. And Uber, I am like close to 4.5 years. So worked in Uber quite a bit as well. I think my during my time, I kind of saw some shift. Like the moment I started working in software back in time, there was the first project I worked was like a desktop product, and then soon just after we went into the business of services, cloud services, and then Amazon came with the concept of microservice architecture. So we moved to microservices world, and then from microservice services world, now we are moving to agentic applications. So I can pretty much see, all the way from desktop software to the most latest version of, agentic applications. So wide variety of areas, span over
Right.
20 years here.
Yeah, excellent. And Mohit, just because I want to have your perspective on this, I've had a lot of conversations with principal software engineers, and one of the experiences they go through in a lot of part of the careers is either it's early in the career or a little bit later, is that when there's a focus on the technical work in the first couple part of their career essentially, and they start going higher as an engineer in terms of working at the organizational level, there is an understanding that there has to be a business understanding behind what they're doing. And after that happens, it gives a better clarity on how they view their technical work. When did this happen for you? And did it happen for you earlier or a little bit later for you?
Yeah, I think very interesting topic to discuss.
Hmm.
Like every software engineer, I believe, goes through this journey.
Hmm.
I think I use this quote, and there's a famous like B school quote which says, "You have to identify what kind of business you are in."
Hmm.
So, I mean, this is the quote which I felt like a deep meaning in. So when I started as a software engineer, the impression or the style of working is you just work on one piece of software, and you kind of you are responsible for that piece. But slowly as you move forward in your career, you would start looking into like, hey, what's the bigger picture? Um,
Hmm.
and um and for me, it was when we moved into services world, when we moved into from software product to services world. There is a kind of microservice architecture. One service is talking to another service, and that is where you kind of expose yourself when you are working in a cross-functional team. And for me particularly, I was working a piece of software like service software backend, which would go and work with some other companies,
Hmm.
endpoints. So that was the kind of first realization of so the quote which I referred earlier, what kind of business you are in. So are
Hmm.
you in a business of writing a piece of software, or you are in a business of solving a bigger problem,
Right.
uh, and then you would start figuring around that. So I would
Hmm.
say mid stage of my career would the time I started realizing more into it. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, as a software engineer, you can create the best solutions and the most capable solutions. But if you don't understand how the customer is using that solution or what problem they're trying to solve, with your work, your solutions. Now, one of the very common perspectives I'm getting from a lot of principal software engineers is about, yes, there are great solutions you can create, but the more important part of the process is actually identifying the correct problem to solve, and that's actually one of the hardest components of being a principal software engineer and leading as a staff engineer as well. So, in your thinking process, when you're entering into a new industry or you are learning about an industry, how do you approach identifying the correct problem to solve?
Yeah, I think yeah, 90% of the effort is goes into when I speak about enterprise level of software
Hmm.
services, 90% of the effort goes into defining the problem.
Hmm.
There are many steps into it. If I talk about formally, nowadays, the mandatory step is, you have to do data analysis. So you just cannot, hand wave the problem statement. The problem statement needs to be backed by, data.
Hmm.
So you would go, go look at historical data patterns, come up with this analysis. You would do like a machine learning, clustering, all those techniques, and find backing data. And then obviously you would interview your potential users because sometimes the data is always there, but
Hmm.
there are many ways to interpret the data.
Hmm.
If you just look at the data, you could be blind by
Hmm.
just looking at the data. So you would have to talk to your customers and then make sense of data collectively
Hmm.
and kind of define your problem statement. So I would say a combination of talking with customers,
Hmm.
you know understanding the data, and also I would say understanding all involved system. If the problem span, like typically the problem span across multiple systems,
Hmm.
so you would pay attention to that, because a lot of time what is the common pattern in the companies like Uber or Microsoft. Some part of the problems are already solved, so you
Hmm.
don't need to reinvent the wheel essentially.
Right.
So if you understand the data, understand the connection between the data, understand your customer profile, and then understand what's already there for you to use.
Hmm.
So if you do in a reasonable manner, so your 90% of problem, I would say 80 to 90% of problem you get solved from that. Yeah.
Excellent. And you were just mentioning this, I think, about understanding your customers and talking to them and following data. And I think this is partly solves or answers the question I'm about to ask. But if you have a different way to answer it, then I'd love to get your opinion on it. Now, a part of defining a problem or understanding a problem space is having a good understanding of the industry you're in. From what I understand, in your career, you've had the opportunity to go from one industry to the other. And in those experiences, you do have to have a good understanding of when you're getting to a new industry, what moves the needle in those new industries. So my question for you is, when you're moving from one old industry to another one, what's your process to identify the moving components in that new industry that's relevant to you, so you can make better solutions?
Yeah, I think this is very relevant to my experience.
Mhm.
I think the first stint of my career I spent in Microsoft. Microsoft is enterprise level product, B2B product offerings, large scale customers, don't deal with B2C products.
Mhm.
When I moved to Uber, there's a B2C product line, more consumer facing product.
Yes.
They are like less enterprise level products. Even they are like few enterprise level products, but Microsoft definitely a lot more than Uber. So I think in terms of system fundamentals,
Mhm.
computer science fundamentals or distributed system fundamentals are still same across these product lines, but they are focus areas. Okay,
Mhm.
so when during my time at Microsoft, you build the enterprise level product which work at a scale. Reliability is like a top concern. It's being used by a organization of size
Mhm.
of 10,000 employees using Microsoft Office product. Okay.
Hmm.
When I compare with the Uber, latency is very sensitive because
Yes.
you're in the business of you're in the business of consumer application, and where
Hmm.
every nanosecond matters. The way you're putting your designs, the way you're storing the databases or managing your services. It's like latency is like a super sensitive metric
Hmm.
to track. So when you move from product line to another product line, I think there are some sort of fundamentals, distributed system fundamentals stays same, but
Hmm.
your focus areas would be different.
Got it.
So that is what I could share from my learning.
Yes.
And then on top of it, there's obviously a more towards business side of things, where there is a business problem statement, right?
Hmm.
So I think that business problem statement would map to these focus areas
Hmm.
in a way.
Hmm.
So once you kind of translate that to your focus area
Hmm.
and apply your distributed system learnings or
Hmm.
your background, so you would be able to get through it. I think the
Hmm.
hard part is really understanding the focus areas.
Yes.
You switch between one domain or set of things you were doing earlier, and then you shift to another set of things, or you move projects or you move companies.
Hmm.
I think that is something, um, as a more staff engineer or principal engineer or
Hmm.
above, as you get more experience, you could make that switch easily.
Hmm.
But I've seen engineers like struggle at a junior level.
Hmm.
It's sometimes hard for get really sense of what really main focus area would be. Yeah.
Excellent. Now, I'd like to shift the conversation towards leadership specifically. Now, for a lot of your part of your career earlier on, it was mainly technical. And when you got a little bit higher and you got to the point of being a principal software engineer, I can guarantee there's definitely times you had to lead people or other engineers for projects. My question for you is, how was the transition for you from being purely technical to now leading other engineers? And what I'd like to ask specifically in this particular case is that these are engineers at Microsoft, at Uber, which are people who are highly competent technical people, and they are a little bit different from other talent that you'd be typically working with. So my question for you is, firstly, how was that transition for you, and how do you particularly focus on leading competent engineers who have their own perspectives to come to the organization to be unified on a particular project?
Yeah, I would say another excellent question. I think this relates to my career directly. I
Hmm.
think in Microsoft, I was when I became principal engineer, I was put in a team called Adoption Broker. So this is the team responsible for making customer sign the contract. Um,
Hmm.
so so Office 365, the team I used to work in Microsoft.
Hmm.
And like obviously you would develop, there are many engineers, like it's a big team, 200 plus engineers, developing these features. But when it comes to adopting those features at a customer level,
Yes.
you need someone very senior person or principal level engineer to work directly with some of these customers.
Hmm.
And sometimes they have challenge or they have additional requirements. So you kind of work directly with him, work directly with customers, along with program managers, and try to come up with solutions for that. And
Hmm.
you would be given team of engineers to which you can lead. Uh,
Right.
so as part of adoption blocker, my job was essentially what you just described, as understanding this problem from customer point of view, and converting that to technical vision,
Hmm.
and mentoring junior engineers to help execute that vision. I think you would, while working with junior engineers, you would have to split these problems,
Yes.
and make it, much more less ambiguous, and define, say, contracts within these subsystems to say,
Hmm.
and monitor their progress. And also, you have to, show some compassion,
Hmm.
as people are new in the career. Uh, they are, all levels of engineers, starting from,
Hmm.
new joinee to, mid senior to senior. So, for my, leadership style, be transparent in terms of what they really need to deliver,
Hmm.
and be transparent in terms of, expectation. I think the engineers are smart, very smart, very capable, or very, highly reputable, in
Right.
terms of the profiles. So if you give, pointers, they are able to, catch pretty quickly.
Hmm.
I think, and at the same time, I need to be careful that there is a room for grow for them.
Hmm.
So, not to provide, granular level of information or all details to
Yeah.
that extent. Give them a room for innovation and growing, so that they can also, apply their own learning.
Very
And
good.
sometimes, these engineers come up with really great ideas, and which, like, you might not even, thought in the beginning. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I think, I guess from leadership principle point of view, you need to be like transparent, and my leadership style is like not really micromanage,
Hmm.
give them option to grow,
Hmm.
and help, unblock when they need. Yeah.
Mhm. Excellent. And you said something very important that some of them are innovative and are able to create new ideas you never thought of before. But in order for those things to happen, you have to have an environment where there's psychological safety, where people are feeling comfortable with challenging ideas and having those new innovative ideas come up. My question for you, Mohit, is you probably already designed those environments where there is psychological safety. What do you think are the moving components that allow you to do that?
Yeah, I think, the main thing would be, you have to open to, ideas. So if you are not open to ideas, or if you don't have, growth mindset, the term being used,
Hmm.
so you need to be, you need to be open to ideas and growth mindset, to create such environment.
Yes.
I think, tech is moving very fastly. Sometimes, you would not be, say, aware of certain design patterns or new, new piece of, libraries which are being developed, and somebody, who has just fresh out of college or university, or like early in the career, they would have, know more about some of these cases which you kind of, not aware of,
Hmm.
and as long as, you are open to idea, and you have, growth mindset, you would, I mean, it works both ways.
Hmm.
So you would learn a few things from them, and obviously, like, they would learn a few things
Hmm.
from you. So if you can
Excellent.
create such environment, it would be, really healthy place to, innovate.
And I ask this question primarily because if you set the precedent that you're open to new ideas, people are willing to give you new ideas and are willing to challenge certain things. However, if you set the precedent that is not acceptable, then there's not going to be an innovative environment at a company. And I really appreciate the fact that you explained why that's important and how you can essentially do that. Now, I'll have two concluding questions for you because Mohit, you and I could easily have a 3-hour podcast because we're having great conversation here. But I'll ask you two concluding questions on your domain of expertise. And one is actually about soft skills. One of the most interesting insights I've gotten from principal engineers and from people who are highly technical is as you grow as an engineer, there is a shift in how you think about soft skills and the prioritization on soft skills. Do you agree with that? And what's your thought process on that?
Yeah, I think yeah. So I mean, in the company setup you work, like there you know there's a work part of it and there's a people part of it.
Hmm.
So you would have to make sure uh, everybody around like is motivated enough to work, and they encouraged to solve these problems. So that is where soft skill would come.
Hmm.
So uh, I think if you have to select between people and work, there is like a easy choice to make. There is like people always come before work. So because at the end of the day, you are working within this group, and if this group is not like really motivated, you or not encouraged, so it may work for you in short term,
Hmm.
but if you are looking for a long-term careers, long-term products, innovations around your company,
Hmm.
so you have to have like soft skills to kind of have people around you, around you feel comfortable working with you, and soft skill will would come around that. So you are giving everybody option to speak up, and
Yes.
participate, and you are listening to concerns, and have people like heard and have people like feeling about like they are really heard here. So it's kind of like an open door policy, what the term is being used. So if you feel something about it, if you have concern about say certain designs or certain processes, or certain things, then you would have to address them, and you may not be the right person to address them. That's totally fine.
Hmm.
But you would definitely redirect them to right set of people,
Yes.
and so that everybody's concern addressed as much as possible, and people really feel motivated around working with you.
Right. And if you want a productive environment, you have to have the ability to have a good exchange of ideas and collaboration with your team members. And I think that's actually something when you start working in teams and you're leading teams, maybe that's actually something that has a different perspective rather than being assigned a project and doing yourself when you're a engineer starting off, right? So that I really appreciate that perspective. Now, the concluding question for you is about your perspective on hiring. So particularly with AI, you're seeing coding change drastically, and almost on a month-to-month basis, you're seeing this change. So my question for you is, I'm sure you've had input on the hiring process, or if you will have in the future. My question for you is, do you think what you're looking for in candidates is changing as AI is changing how coding works specifically? Are you looking for something other skill sets as well?
Yes, I think that's definitely the case. I mean,
Mhm.
I cannot speak much about my own company process.
Sure.
I can speak about what I am, reading through other companies. So I think definitely there's a shift in hiring.
Mhm.
Like there's a old way or the previous way of hiring. I wouldn't say like really old way. The previous way of hiring, you have these coding questions or design questions. You would have like a 45 minutes or 15-minute session. You would solve two problems, and
Mhm.
write test cases, etc. I think now it's already being shift in some of the companies taking
Yes.
interviews. There are AI coding rounds. So I mean, there's more focus on debugging skills,
Hmm.
and there's definitely one round of AI coding where you can take help from AI to write some code. I mean, in terms of seeing industry trends, I would say like that would be more common trend going forward. Going
Hmm.
forward, I cannot speak like which all companies are doing this. I know some companies are already doing this. But going forward, that I guess would become more common.
Yes.
So far, the AI assistant, they are coding around AI assistant, but there are no AI assistant design rounds. So my understanding is there would be AI assistant design rounds as well going forward. So I think some of the coding, basic coding exercise or basic, designing exercise, that would not be, say needed. Um,
Hmm.
there would be a lot more focus on specialized skills. So specialized design skills and specialized coding debugging skills. So more towards that. So
Hmm.
we can uh,
Very good.
heading towards that. Yeah.
Very good. So Mohit, what I'll do now is shift this conversation a little bit more about you, and then we'll go and conclude the podcast with a quick fitness segment and your plans for this year. But this question could be the most difficult one I ask you throughout the whole episode, so be prepared for this one. But the question for you is there a particular problem in your life that you've overcame that changed the way you look at yourself?
Yeah, I think like they are definitely to answer your question, they are not a particular problem, but there would be always a series of problems you would deal with. So one after other.
Mhm.
For me specifically, they were obviously, like I said, a series of problems, and it will keep coming. So there's no, a stage where there's no
Mhm.
new problem will come. I think the meta point is you would have to, you know, uh, first of all, you have to admit it that this is a problem,
Mhm.
and once you admit it, then you would be, find ways to address it.
Right.
I think the hard part is admitting or identifying this is a problem. So,
Mhm.
I mean, the you would be in a situation where you have a certain outcome,
Mhm.
so but you are not able to find the actual problem.
Mhm.
Say you don't get promoted in a cycle, right? So this is the outcome, right? So from there on, you have done series of things, but you are not sure, what was missing, right?
Mhm.
Whether I missed design or communication or some other skills, right? So
Mhm.
I think once you identify the missing part, and acknowledge it, that
Mhm.
hey, this is what I missed. I think that's the
Yeah.
hard part actually.
Yeah.
The easy part is really fixing that,
Yeah.
uh, and then like I said, there will be series of problems which would be coming in your way.
Absolutely. Now, Mohit, if someone's meeting you for the first time, aside from your work, what should they know about you?
I think from my side, they would they should know like hey, I'm like um, I have like some 15 year of experience, and I'm always open to new ideas, and ready to learn with them. So if they have
Okay.
something new to share, I'm ready to listen and work with them. Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. So what I'll do now is share a very concise perspective regarding health and fitness, and then we'll go and conclude with your plans for this year. The only perspective I want to share today is really about addressing the main problem in what I believe is in health and fitness. The only reason why you would able to make a successful transformation is because you're not able to adhere to the approach long term. That's the only reason why you never have a successful one. And one of the things I like to talk about is addressing the ability to do it on a long enough time scale and doing it with a very busy schedule. What a lot of people do at the beginning is they prioritize something that is very gym dependent and what is location dependent, meaning you have to shift your schedule around for it and go to a location and exercise. The problem with that is the ability to adhere to it is a lot harder. So what I would focus on, and hopefully this is valuable for people who have those packed schedules, is to prioritize something that can move around with you and that adapts to your schedule. Now, what I always talk about on this podcast is something like step count, right? Because that is something that you can do while you're traveling. You can do that while you're taking a phone call. You can do that while you're essentially listening to our podcast right now. And the idea behind that and why I keep stressing it is because if you don't have something that adapts to your schedule and you are a busy individual, your ability to actually have the successful transformation long term are extremely low. But if you have an adaptable approach, it's something that you need, something you can keep, your success rate will be a lot higher. And that's the idea. And this could be the difference between you being successful and not being successful. And that's the reason why I want to talk about that today. And again, this is exactly what I did use to lose 70 pounds like here and keep it off. So hopefully that was valuable for the audience. What we'll do now is go ahead and conclude the podcast with Mohit's plans for this year, whether it's going to be professionally or personally.
Yeah, I think right now everybody's like AI. Everybody talking about AI. So my plan is definitely expand my knowledge base for AI.
Hmm.
And like you said, briefly said about always keep check on your health.
Hmm.
Definitely on a personal level, the plan is to continue with exercising and a lot more physical activity and reduce screen time.
For sure.
Um, this is definitely on the goal list here.
Awesome. And is LinkedIn the best place to learn about you, or is there a different part of the internet that's better to learn about you?
LinkedIn would be the best one to learn about me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mohit, thank you for joining me. This was Aryan Mohindra and Mohit Nagpal. Thank